And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about Zach Wilson and the Jets trading Zach Wilson to the Denver Broncos. So if you remember yesterday, if you tuned in, if you watched yesterday's show, I did talk about the Jets and Zach Wilson and how they valued him. Well, they looked at him as an asset. And I said, well, it doesn't seem like teams are lining up to trade for him. So it's possible he could be on the team still in 2024 and, well, for the 2024 season. And the other thing, too, that I mentioned was, when talking about the draft, I said, what are the Denver Broncos going to do with their pick? Because they still need a quarterback. It's not going to be Jared Stidham that's going to be the starter. And what ended up happening was Zach Wilson ended up getting traded to the Broncos. Now, does that necessarily mean Zach Wilson, he's the starter? No. I mean, he's going to be brought in to compete, to maybe be the starter, have a chance to be the starter. This trade doesn't necessarily mean he's the starter. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the Broncos are out on maybe taking a quarterback. But at least gives them another option, because I think, so they have Jared Stidham, but I think they also have Ben DiNucci, and I don't think Ben DiNucci is going to, be the answer either. But that's that's their options now. Now with Zach Wilson being brought in, you got him, Jared Stidham, and Ben DiNucci on the roster. So the exact specifics of the trade, so obviously Zach Wilson was the former number 2 overall pick in the 2021 draft. The trade involves a late round pick swap for the 2024 draft, with the Jets receiving a 6th round pick and the Broncos receiving a 7th round pick. The 6th round pick is the 203rd pick, and the 7th round pick is it's a 256th pick, along with Zach Wilson. And yeah, so the Jets actually ended up trading him. They didn't want to release him, and they ended up getting their wish in trading him eventually, finally finding a trade partner and trading him to Denver. And this finally ends the Zach Wilson saga with the Jets, because it was a messy one. It definitely was. It just got worse and worse as the years went on, and they brought in Aaron Rodgers, and then he gets hurt, and then they're forced to put Zach Wilson back in, and it was bad. And then he ends up getting benched. You had Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian playing. It didn't work out. It didn't work out. And you could say the Jets didn't do right by him, which is true, but Zach Wilson also just wasn't very good. And maybe in a change of scenery, he could do better, but I don't see it. I don't see it. I mean, you do see talent there, but is it at that point where he's too far gone, where it's just, can he get better? And is Denver the right spot for him? I mean, the Broncos, they probably figured, well, we need a quarterback. So they let's take a chance on him for the time being. But again, I also did say that doesn't necessarily rule out the possibility of them taking one in the draft. Probably not. But yeah, the Broncos quarterback room is not the best. Now, they could probably be looking to next year and finishing with a bad record, because, I mean, with the quarterbacks they have on the team right now, I mean, I don't really expect the Broncos to win a lot of games. Then you probably look to next year to maybe draft one. I mean, I don't really know what the draft class is going to be like for 2025, but maybe that's what they could be focused on, because, like I said, I don't think they're going to win a lot of games with what they currently have. But who knows? Sean Payton is the head coach for now, and he's trying to mold this team in his image. And I don't really expect the Broncos to win a lot of games in 2024. So we'll see what ends up happening from that. But also doesn't help when you have Russell Wilson's cap hit for 2024 and beyond that. But we'll see what they do. But yeah, it just I think for the Jets, this for them and their fan base, I think this is good for them. This gets that, you get that distraction out finally, because that's really what it was becoming now. It was just a distraction, and now they can just focus on what they have on the roster, who's going to be making an impact. Because Zach Wilson wasn't going to make an impact on this roster unless another injury. So now they got him out, so you don't have to worry about it. But it's just, yeah, it was, again, the Jets, I don't think, did right by him, but also he didn't help himself with some of the things he said. I mean, you go back to, a couple of seasons ago when, the Jets lose that game to the Patriots, and he didn't take accountability after the game. And, yeah, it just, that was the beginning of the end for him, really. Well, it was part of it. Because then you also had, the Jets players wearing the Mike White t-shirts and, really praising him, and it just, it was a mess. It was a mess. And the Jets were really hoping that Aaron Rodgers could have been like a mentor to him, and, Zach Wilson could sit on the sidelines and watch Rodgers do his thing throughout the year and not have to worry about ever taking a snap unless the Jets were up by a lot, or, he takes the final kneel down for a game. But that ended up not happening. Rodgers ended up getting hurt. Supposedly really didn't respond to Zach Wilson after the injury. And Zach Wilson had to play and did not really play well. Had a couple of games where he did play well. One of them they won. One of them they could have won. And that was against the Chiefs. But other than that, it was a lot of bad. A lot of bad. And again, it was funny how Joe Douglas was talking about wanting to be the organization to become that quarterback factory where they produce good quarterbacks. Well, that just has not been the case. And now you got two quarterbacks. Well, even last year you had two quarterbacks that you brought in from outside the organization, and they weren't very good quarterbacks. Well, and I'm talking about Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, that's different. But he got hurt. But now, you got Rodgers, you got Tyrod Taylor, both from outside the organization. And Tyrod's been a good backup. At least with the Giants, I thought he was decent for him. And Aaron Rodgers, first ballot Hall of Famer. But eventually, you're going to have to find the next guy because Aaron Rodgers is not going to be around forever. Aaron Rodgers wants to play multiple years, but he's probably not going to be playing beyond, I would say, like 2025. Maybe I'll give him 2 years, this year and next year, but I don't know. I don't know if I could say beyond that. I think I'm being nice by saying 2025. First, we got to get through this season. And if the Jets go out there and they have a good season and Rodgers plays well, then okay, all right, well, I feel better about things going into 2025. But if it's more of the same, then, yeah, the Jets got to find his successor. Because the Packers did. The Packers found it with no problem. Jordan Love just sat behind Aaron Rodgers as he won back-to-back MVPs, and then, 2022 had a down year, but in the Packers, they almost made the playoffs. They ended up missing it. Packers traded him. Jordan Love steps in. There were some growing pains, but seems like he's the guy. Packers got their franchise guy for the next, 10 plus years. So now the Jets, you had Sam Darnold, and then you got Zach Wilson, and it just has not worked out. So then you trade for Aaron Rodgers. He gets hurt. And again, you're really hoping that Aaron Rodgers can play a full season. And you hope that he does play multiple years, so that does give you time to maybe find his successor and have him sit behind Rodgers until Rodgers eventually hangs it up, and then you can transition over to that. But the problem is that the Jets have not had success with that. So once Rodgers leaves, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. Well, I say that, but even with him, last year he gets hurt, and it just derailed the whole season. And it just, again, I was standing right over there when that injury happened, and it just, I was beside myself. I really was when he got hurt. Because, again, I really wanted to see him go out there and show that, hey, I'm still Aaron Rodgers. I could still play. But we never got to see it. The only highlights were you go back to the preseason when he threw the touchdown to Garrett Wilson, and then him running out with the American flag. Those are his highlights as a Jet. That's it. But he's going to be healthy in 2024. Like I said, like I keep saying, I'm going to stay in the minority. Aaron Rodgers is going to do well, and the Jets are going to have a good year. And if they don't, like I said, I'll come on here and I'll tell you I was wrong. But I don't want to be wrong. Because I heard, from family members and, and I think some friends, weren't as optimistic that, it's not going to work out. He's going to get hurt. Something's going to happen. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to hear this. I want him to prove them all wrong. And they ended up being right because he ended up getting hurt. And I felt very foolish. But let's hope that take two in 2024, that's not the case. He goes out there and he plays really well. And when it comes to the Broncos, I mean, I don't have any expectations for Zach Wilson. I think this is good for him that he's in a new spot. But I don't really expect anything from this. Other than you got a chance to compete to be the starter, at least for 1 year. And maybe if you go out there and you play well, then, your stock goes up and you get another chance. But it's just, I don't really expect Zach Wilson to really do anything with the Broncos. But I could be wrong. But I don't think I will be. And also, you see the Broncos' new uniforms, so they'll have new uniforms. Throwbacks from back in the day, when Elway, Shannon Sharp were playing. So those uniforms will be worn in 2024. So I like how they're really leaning into the throwback uniforms. I like the Seahawks. I thought were one of my favorites from 2023, from last year. The Giants, I like their throwbacks. Those, I think, should be the primary uniforms. I'm a fan of those. I like how they're really leaning into the throwbacks. So now the Broncos are the latest team to do that. So bringing them back for 2024. I like the Patriots too, the red ones. They wore those in week 2. I like those. But yeah, so they'll be repping those. And Zach Wilson will be repping the throwback with the Broncos if he's still with the team. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Zach Wilson trade. You see him revitalizing his career with Denver. Let me know in the comments. So with that being said, now we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tyreek Hill and him praising Mike McDaniel over something that happened in the playoff game against the Chiefs. So that is what we will discuss when we come back from our final break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.